As we talk about the investigation here, federal investigators are looking at this massacre. They're deciding whether it should be prosecuted as an act of domestic terrorism. The FBI director today saying it does not fall in that category.
I wouldn't, because of the way we define terrorism under the law. Right? Terrorism is an act of violence done or threatened to, in order to try to influence a public body or the citizenry. So it's more of a political act. And again, based on what I know so far, I don't see it as a political act. That doesn't make it any less horrific, the label, but terrorism has a definition under federal law.
Let's talk about this with former FBI Assistant Director Tom Fuentes and defense attorney Mark Garagos. First, let's look, guys, at what defines the three-part definition of terrorism. These three characteristics must exist. Let's list them. First, the crime must involve acts dangerous to human life that violate federal or state law. One criteria for the second characteristic is that it has to appear intended to intimidate or coerce people. And finally, it has to occur in the United States. To you, Tom, do you agree with Director Comey? Does this not
Well, to be honest, I'm not
terrorism?
sure. I'm not sure I completely agree with him. I think that, in a general sense, if the intent of the attack was to somehow influence policy, to bring about a race war, to bring about another end, then that's similar to what we see with ISIS and other terrorist groups, that they're trying to achieve a political or a religious end using violence. So to me, I think what he's really saying is that it's much harder to prove that element when you already have a much easier case with the 9 murders.
Hate crime.
Well, even hate crime. Hate crime predominantly is used to elevate a crime from, say, a third-degree felony to a level 2 felony or 2 to a 1. In this case, where you have 9 counts of premeditated murder, they can't go beyond that. That's as high as it already gets. Right. So, and I think the other political aspect that may be going on behind the scenes, when you say that the investigators are trying to determine, the investigators are gathering every fact they can possibly gain. It'll be the prosecutors, the Department of Justice, along with the authorities in South Carolina. They'll decide which prosecution to go with, which one brings about the greatest penalty and has the biggest impact. And I think politically there might be a tendency to say, let's let South Carolina do this themselves and try to make up for the years and years of segregation and other racist policies.
So Mark Garagos, looking at it from a legal standpoint, when you look at what these prosecutors are going to decide, hate crime, terrorism, one or the other, or both, how do you see it?
Well, as a practical matter, I echo what you just said. It doesn't get any more serious in the criminal law than multiple murder. That's it. You've hit the brass ring, so to speak, of the criminal justice system. So this discussion, both by the FBI director and frankly, I think he would have been a lot better off not wading into this because clearly it fits the definition of domestic terrorism. It's a slam dunk in terms of hitting all 3 elements. Was it intended to coerce? Yes, his own words were he wanted to start a race war.
Right.
And all you have to do is substitute white 21-year-old and put Muslim, Arab type, and they would be calling this domestic terrorism. So there's a kind of an insidious viewpoint here that you're looking at.
It seems like they're saying there's a double standard.
Well, there clearly is a double standard, and that's why I don't even understand why the FBI is wading into it. We have a set of laws for people who commit multiple murders in this country, and you can't do anything more than you do to them, which is this is a death penalty state. That's the ultimate sanction. So this idea of, well, is it a hate crime? Is it domestic terrorism? Is really all kind of silly because ultimately, at the end of the day, it's a multiple murder punishable by death.
I want to get your take, Mark, on this judge, right? So the judge that presided over that bond hearing yesterday is really under scrutiny because in 2005 he made these racist remarks. He even used the N-word, relaying a story from a sheriff's deputy, and he said there are 4 kinds of people, and he listed them out, and one of them was the N-word. He defends that by saying, look, I was trying to guide this young African-American defendant, tell them to make better choices in life. Is this someone who should preside over this case, let alone any case?
Well, the best thing you can say about this judge is he's completely tone deaf. And if you take a look at why he was censored in 2005, as you said, he was trying to make a point. White people, rednecks, black people, the N-word, totally inappropriate in a courtroom. Yesterday what happened, I would like to ascribe good motives to the people. I always try to. And I think when he came out there, he felt emotional. And he was trying to say, let's heal, let's all get together. But then you don't get up there and start talking about the horrific time that the victim or not the victims, but the defendant's family has. That is true. Defendants' families go through a lot. I've been doing this, I'm entering my 4th decade of doing it. They are the collateral damage of the criminal justice system, and nobody has any sympathy for them. However, talk about tone deaf. This is the absolute last time where you want to make that statement. And understand what was going on here. This whole thing yesterday was a created for TV court hearing, down to the video camera that's facing the TV cameras, with the 2 guys standing behind wearing flak jackets and him facing in there so you could see him full frontal, so you could examine his face. The judge allowing people, the victims, to come up and families and give statements. You don't need a victim impact statement because this was a bond hearing, and he had no authority to grant bond in a murder case.
And Tom, very quickly, you have noted, look, the Southern Poverty Law Center says there are 19 hate groups in South Carolina alone. You're worried about a copycat.
Yeah,
crimes.
that's still not just a copycat, but whether other similar acts are underway, by one of these groups. And, the FBI's been fighting white hate groups for 100 years, the KKK, and back in the 80s, when I was a younger agent, the Order, Aryan Brotherhood, Aryan Nation, many different groups. McVeigh was a white extremist terrorist when he did the bombing in Oklahoma City. So this has been going on for many, many years. It's something that they do address aggressively.
Wait until you see what's going to happen. If they authenticate that he's holding up that Confederate flag and also a separate photo of burning the American flag, and at the same time you've got certain politicians who already came out yesterday defending the Confederate flag and saying that's part of our history, and here's your symbol today with this mass murderer holding up the Confederate flag and embracing it. There's a whole subtext
I do
here.
think it's interesting, some of those South Carolina lawmakers who have supported that flag being flown over the State House, which we'll debate later on this show, have come out yesterday and said, look, this is something we're going to have to readdress.
And that was before this thing went viral.
Yeah, before we saw these photos. Guys, thank you very much. I have to leave it there. I appreciate it. Tom Fuentes, Mark Garagos. And really important in all of this are the victims. That's what matters the most. So if you want to help the victims of this tragedy or their families, go to cnn.com/impact. We have a whole list there of ways that you can remember them and you can help them. Again, that's cnn.com/impact. Coming up, what would you do if you were caught in the crossfire of a mass shooting? And what should you do to increase your chances of survival? We're going to talk to someone who unfortunately has had to write a lot about mass shootings in America next.